My name is Emily Elliott, and I'm a reporter for East Lansing Info who's been covering school board for the last 6 months. And with me today, I have Dr. Jane Turner, who's going to be assisting with the interviews. She is a pediatrician in East Lansing and a former school board trustee. And we're beginning our interview with Mr. Matthew Heos, one of the candidates for school board. The first question we have for you today is, if you were elected to the school board, you would have to deal with a major public health crisis. Talk about how you see yourself handling this as a board member in terms of decision making.
Well, I think the board's role in terms of the pandemic is to work with the administration. First of all, listen to the public health professionals, students, parents, teachers, and the administration, and try to understand what the different groups are, their perspectives are, but also how are we going to educate our youth in this, under these circumstances. And clearly it's not easy. So I think the board needs to gather that information and then work with the administration on how to develop a plan that would allow students to learn in a safe manner.
Very good. So I'll move on to the second theme, and that is equity and inclusion. The district has identified equity and inclusion as an important goal, and has pursued this by developing a new handbook with policies, and is making plans to make the faculty better represent the diversity of the student body. Talk about, just tell us how you see this issue. What do you think of the policies? I'm sure you've thought deeply about this.
Well, I have. I grew up here, and so East Lansing has always been one of the more progressive districts, and we're racially diverse. We have, students from very different socioeconomic backgrounds. Our school has to be a place of inclusion where everybody has that opportunity to make the best of themselves with the tools that are available to all. And, we can't get tied up with equality and equity. There's a debate on that, but I think that we need to live up to our ideals. And I think anti-bullying is one of my main topics. And I think it goes hand in hand with equity, because you can't have a school or an environment where students feel humiliated or intimidated or what have you, and have that as an extra component. And I think if we can continue our work in developing an inclusive environment that's free of humiliation, intimidation, and those kind of things, I think that we have a chance to live up to our ideals. And I would just continue, and if I'm elected as trustee, I would continue to pursue those goals.
So can you give me an example of how you might address? I think I noticed that in your written response to questions previously, that this anti-bullying is clearly an important issue for you. Any suggestions on specifics on how we can address bullying in the schools?
Well, I think the State Journal, I had read an article a few months back where it talks about how some of the surrounding districts, where they're at with compliance with, it's called Matt's Law, which is the anti-bullying law. We had an East Lansing student commit suicide a number of years back. The city of Lansing just settled a case for a similar kind of instance in the Lansing School District. And so what I think we need to do is have the administration review our efforts, what's begun under Matt's Law, figure out where we can improve, figure out where we're not compliant with the statute, become compliant, and then really set out a policy that the students have to follow, and one that can be enforced. It can't just be a toothless lion, so to speak, where you have this nice ideal of anti-bullying and inclusion, but don't follow through with a policy that gets you to where we'd like to be. And so I think I would start off with asking the administration to review the implementation of Matt's Law and what we can do to improve on it.
Okay.
And then have follow-up meetings to get there.
Okay. Follow-up, that is important. Thank you.
The next question we have for you is, how do you understand the role of a trustee in relationship to the administration? What do you see as your chief responsibility in this area?
Well, I think the trustee's main role is planning across different levels, be it curriculum, be it the finances, be it anti-bullying. You name the policy. The board should be a place where we gather those information from the different stakeholders. Really listen to what the needs are, and then craft plans to suggest, say, hey, administration, we want you to do this policy because we think it's central to creating a good environment for education for all of our students. And so I think the role of trustees is to do just that. I think that's consistent with what our statute allows.
Okay.
In terms of, you mentioned working across the different levels, what do you think would be the greatest difficulty in wrangling children who are from, age 4 or 5 all the way up to 18? How would you grapple with dealing with the different levels of education for policy making?
That's a good question, because right now I've got a second grader, and then my niece is also a second grader, and I've got a nephew in early 5s. And so that's very different from the dynamic of middle school and then again high school. And so I think the board members, myself included, if I'm elected, would have to really figure out what each group needs and then coordinate an overarching policy that would apply to all. And maybe you have to have a policy with subparts to specifically address the different age groups that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, this conversation about policy is a nice segue to the next question, which is about all that you have to learn as a trustee. You'll have to quickly learn a set of laws, policies and protocols. How will you approach bringing yourself up to speed?
Well, fortunately, I've learned how to study law. It's what I do for a living. So I think learning the statutes, which I'm not an expert in, it's not my field, but I would know how to digest that information quickly. And then I think talking to the other board members and the administration about how we can all come together to fulfill our goals, et cetera, like I've said before. But I think that once you get through the law and read the policies, you've got to work with the groups that you're in and make sure that your understanding is what everybody else's is, because if you're not speaking the same language, then you're going to talk past each other and we're not going to get much done on the board. It makes no good to set a goal that legally we can't accomplish, and so I think that having my own background in education and how I would approach that, I think sets me up nicely for interacting with other board members in the administration and teachers and students and parents.
I remember from my time on the board, which was quite a few years ago, the Michigan Association of School Boards offered courses for new board members. Would that be something of interest to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because anywhere you can expand your horizon on the issue that you're dealing with, you're going to be able to serve your constituents in a better way.
Our next question is, what programs at East Lansing Public Schools, educational or otherwise, would you like to see the district devote more resources to, and how might you make that happen?
So one of the central themes of my campaign is that I think we need to refocus education on social studies, which is more about civics. We have a great social studies program, but civics is taught for one semester to juniors and seniors as part of the government economics component of social studies. And I think that we should devote some resources towards having 5th graders have a government class and 8th graders also, because I think generally what you see in the population are people that are disillusioned with the government because they either think it's corrupt or it doesn't function, or they don't understand how it's supposed to function. And school is supposed to be a place where we educate our electorate to run our country and become good citizens and positive members in that society. And so I think that there's a general lack of understanding in that segment. And I would hope that the administration would develop a curriculum that would include getting 5th graders familiar with the branches of government and their roles. And then you can expand on that. Once kids get to 8th grade, they're going to be a little more capable of understanding a more nuanced class on government. And then when you get to seniors, these people are going to vote. Our seniors are going to vote. So shouldn't they have a more in-depth understanding of their government than the survey course that we have for juniors and seniors? And I think I recall this was true back in 1988 when I was in 5th grade at White Hills. we did a poll on Bush versus Dukakis. So everybody knows that fifth graders are paying attention to what's going on in the political world. They hear their parents, they hear what their friends say, that their parents say, but it shouldn't be a mystery. You shouldn't have to go to James Madison to know the ins and outs of what makes the government work. And I think that we can do better in that regard. And that's one of my main focuses in my campaign.
If you were to play a role in developing the civics curriculum, what are 3 main takeaways you'd want the students to have?
If I was to have a role in it, if I was writing it myself, I think I had broken into government kind of 1, 2, and 3. Government 1 for fifth graders. Fifth graders can understand the branches of government. And, there's the old cartoon of what makes a bill. So I mean, there has been courses out there and a way to teach elementary kids about government that has existed and has been neglected for about 50 years that should come back in. And I want to say, trying to get back to the second and third part of your question, my role would be to just ask the administration to develop that better, because we have great social studies teachers. It's not that we don't have a great program. It's that I think that it needs to be more robust and more focused on the government issue. Even economics also, micro and macroeconomics are great, but how does that translate to, an 18-year-old going out into the world to manage their personal finance? I would add that component also, so that there's a more robust attention focused on those issues. I'm not an educator, so I don't write curriculum, and I don't want to pretend to and say that I've got the answers to that. But I think that we need to tap the resources we have locally and use them.
Thank you.
Well, we have one more question, and I'm not sure how much time we have, but I'll ask the question now. How would you like to engage with parents, including those who are uninformed or who may be informed but disagree with you?
So if you disagree with someone, you can disagree without being disagreeable is the number one rule. You're not going to get anywhere dealing in a democracy by alienating certain groups. Now, being on the school board, as I understand it, you tend to upset a certain segment of the parents, irrespective of what your position is. There's some people that will disagree, but finding consensus is the goal. And I think that having town halls, for example, in the elementary schools to bring the neighborhoods together might be a way for the board to reach out to the community and get direct involvement. And I'm not talking just like public comment that you hear during the board meetings, but something that's more community-based, where people can come in and interact with the board members and voice their opinions. Maybe somebody doesn't want to do that in a group, but maybe wants to do that individually. But I think if you get face-to-face with parents and give them that opportunity to say it either to your face or, here, shoot me an email, give me a call after hours, tell me what you're thinking. I think the board could do that more than just the scheduled meetings. But I know adding work to the plate isn't what everybody wants, but I think that maybe we need it from time to time, especially on issues that, the pandemic is one that I think on the board meeting coming up, there's going to be everybody's going to have an opinion, and they all deserve to be heard. And the board needs to make itself available for that.
Okay, well, thank you. Do we have a little bit of time, Emily?
We have 1 minute and 36 seconds.
So maybe there's something you'd like to add.
No, I think I said it, Jane. I really think that the main thrust of my campaign is about expanding civics beyond one semester in high school. I think we're shortchanging our student population, and they deserve more. And I'm going to be, you just saw President Trump come out saying he wants to have history class tailored to be very patriotic. And that is not what I'm out to do. I want the full story, whether it's genocide of the Native Americans, slavery, all of these things are a part of the fabric that make up our country. And we have to have an honest discussion about it to truly empathize with our fellow citizens and non-citizens about their background, their story. And I think that dovetails into anti-bullying and equity. If you're going to prejudge people and only say, if you agree with the patriotic version of America, well, I don't think most Americans believe that. They've been taught otherwise. Our social studies has gone beyond that. And we need to continue telling the full story, not just the parts that make us feel good.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak.
No problem.
It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you. Pleasure for me too. Are we done, or I'll log off?
I just need